He said no to me and I never forgot it. I wasn't used to being ignored. Not in school, not in clubs, not in life. So when Zaid Khan, the quiet, overly serious Muslim guy from uni, dismissed me like I was nothing, it hit a nerve. I should have moved on. Should have brushed it off like every other minor rejection. But I didn't. I studied him. Watched his speeches online. Followed his faith. Took notes. Copied his values. Not because I admired him, but because I wanted to crush him. My plan was simple. Become everything he stood for, then rip it all apart. But what I didn't expect was to find something real in the middle of the act. I still remember the way he looked at me. Calm, distant, annoyingly unaffected. Zaid Khan had this weird stillness about him. He didn't fidget. He didn't flirt. He didn't even look at me like other men did, like I was some reward they deserved for breathing near me. I was 21. Confident. Pretty. My Instagram was full of flattering photos and shallow compliments. I'd never been told no. Not by guys, not by teachers, not by anyone who mattered. Until him. Zaid and I were in the same political theory class at uni. He always sat in the front, taking notes like a machine, and left as soon as lectures ended. Never partied. Never drank. Never made a fool of himself like the rest of us. Naturally, that made him interesting. I approached him once. Casual, smiling, charming. I asked if he wanted to grab coffee sometime, maybe go over lecture notes. He looked at me, paused, then said one word. No. No explanation. No softening. Just that. Like I'd asked him to walk on broken glass. I laughed awkwardly and walked off like it was no big deal. But my chest felt like it had cracked. That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I liked him. Not really. It was the audacity of it. The way he looked at me like I didn't exist. Like I wasn't enough. No one had ever made me feel small like that. And so began the obsession. First I just checked his socials. He had a small following, nothing flashy. Quotes from the Quran, some lecture clips, photos of charity work in Syria. Boring if I'm honest. But then I started watching one of his public debates. Then another. He spoke about justice, faith, modesty, discipline. He spoke with a kind of quiet fire that made you feel like maybe the world wasn't completely doomed. Still didn't mean he had the right to dismiss me like that. Years passed. I graduated. Moved to London. Got a job in marketing and tried to live the influencer lifestyle. Yoga on weekends. Bottomless brunches. Hinge dates with men who smelled like gym socks and thought feminism was a TikTok trend. And yet, I kept thinking about him. One night, after a particularly miserable date with a banker who bragged about crypto for 2 hours, I went home, poured a glass of wine, and found myself typing "What do Muslims believe?" into Google. It started as a joke. I told myself it was just research. Just curiosity. But deep down I knew what I was doing. I wanted to understand Zaid's world. I wanted to beat him at it. If I could learn his faith, mirror his principles, become the kind of person he couldn't ignore. Maybe then I could finally win. Maybe then he'd see me, want me, need me. And once he did, I'd be the one to say no. That was the plan. I bought a Quran. I downloaded lectures. I followed Muslim influencers and hijabi fashionistas. I even started waking up early to read hadith summaries with my morning coffee. At first it all felt strange, foreign words, strange rituals, rules that seemed oppressive. But then I found myself underlining verses, replaying certain talks, feeling a weird tug in my chest when I read about things like sabr, patience, and tawakkul, trusting in God. I wasn't ready to admit it yet, but something was shifting. One night I had a dream. I was walking barefoot on a road that kept changing. Stone, sand, water. It hurt, but I didn't stop. Up ahead was a door, old, wooden, glowing faintly. And standing in front of it was Zaid. He didn't speak. Just looked at me and nodded once, then turned and walked through. I woke up gasping. My heart pounding. I didn't believe in signs. I didn't even believe in God. But something was happening. And for the first time since that humiliating No. I wasn't sure if I was the one in control anymore. I'm not sure when the plan stopped being just a plan. At first, it was all performance. I downloaded the Quran Majid app. Set reminders for prayer times even though I didn't pray. I watched hijabi makeup tutorials and practiced Arabic phrases in the mirror. Not because I believed any of it, but because I wanted to look like I did. To him at least. Zaid still posted occasionally, mostly about community work and dua events. I noticed he'd been invited to a conference in London. A small one. Nothing glitzy. But I knew what that meant. He was coming here. Suddenly everything kicked into high gear. I bought modest clothing. Long coats. Neutral colors. Even a few scarves. When I walked into the Islamic bookstore near Edgware Road, my palms were sweating. The girl behind the counter wore a warm smile and said Assalamu alaikum, like I was one of them. I smiled back and mumbled, hi. It felt like trespassing. But I bought a Tasbih, a book on women in Islam and a beginner's guide to prayer anyway. Each night I practiced. Not just the rituals, the role. I imagined meeting Zaid. Bumping into him by accident. He'd be shocked. Intrigued. Maybe even impressed. And when he asked why Islam? I'd say something poetic. Something powerful. I'd say it was because of him. And just when he softened, I'd walk away. That was the fantasy. I didn't expect the guilt. The more I learned, the more I realized how sacred everything was to the people who believed. The prayers, the fasting, the discipline. It wasn't cosplay for them. It was real. And I was faking it. Or was I? I couldn't tell anymore. There were moments, brief, quiet ones, when I did feel something. Like when I tried fasting during Ramadan just to see if I could. I thought I'd hate it, but instead I felt strangely calm. Hungry, sure. But focused. Lighter. Like my mind stopped buzzing for once. I didn't tell anyone. My friends would have mocked me. They were all about manifesting energy and spiritual independence. But the second I mentioned religion, they rolled their eyes. Especially Islam. It was too extreme. Too patriarchal. Too backwards. I didn't care. That scared me. I went to a mosque. Just to watch. Just to observe. It was this quiet little place in East London. I sat in the women's area behind a partition and listened to a lecture about forgiveness. The Imam talked about how even the Prophet Muhammad forgave people who had hurt him. People who'd tried to kill him, humiliate him, destroy his family. He said, when you forgive someone, it's not about them. It's about freeing yourself. That line stayed with me. Because I wasn't free. I was still chained to Zaid. To what he made me feel. To my need to prove something. And no matter how much I faked it, the modesty, the knowledge, the ritual, I still hadn't let go. The day of the conference came. I wore a pale green abaya I had no business wearing. Wrapped a scarf loosely around my hair. Stood in the back of the auditorium waiting. Zaid was up front. Calm as ever. He spoke about finding peace through submission. About how worship wasn't just bowing your head. It was surrendering your ego. My stomach twisted. Because all I'd done for years was feed mine. After the event, I lingered in the hallway. And for a brief moment our eyes met. He looked straight at me. Recognition flickered in his face. Subtle, restrained. He gave a small nod. Respectful. Then turned away and began talking to an old man beside him. That was it. No spark. No shock. No slow-motion moment where he realized who I was and fell to his knees in regret. Just a nod. I went home that night and cried. Not because I failed, but because I didn't even know what winning meant anymore. Was this still revenge? Or was I chasing something else entirely? That night I opened the Quran again. This time not to look for quotes. Not to impress anyone. Just to read. And for the first time, I whispered something I never thought I'd say. God, if you're real, I'm listening. I didn't wake up Muslim. There was no dramatic moment. No white light. No divine voice whispering ancient truths into my ear. But something shifted. It started with silence. Not the awkward kind, the kind that feels like an exhale after holding your breath for too long. I stopped checking Zaid's Instagram. I stopped practicing lines in the mirror. I stopped pretending. And in that space, something else began to grow. I started praying. Not perfectly. Not even regularly. But sincerely. The first time I bowed my head, I cried. Not because I felt holy or pure or enlightened, but because it felt real. Like I wasn't performing anymore. Like for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was just there. Me and God. And for once that was enough. I began reading the Quran from the beginning. Fully. Without skimming. Without searching for something I could weaponize. The stories hit me differently now. Moses. Mary. The way they were tested. Humiliated. Isolated. But never abandoned. There was this verse I underlined 3 times. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. Quran 94:6. I didn't know how to explain it, but I believed that. Not blindly. Not like a child. But like someone who had tasted restlessness for years. And finally caught a glimpse of peace. One night, I sat at my desk staring at a photo of myself from 3 years ago. Fake lashes, forced smile, a cocktail in one hand and emptiness in the other. And I thought, who was that even for? Every choice I'd made up to that point. The clothes, the relationships, the curated life. It had all been designed to fill something. Something hollow. But it never worked. I always needed more. More attention, more likes, more validation. And when Zaid denied me that, I snapped. Because deep down I'd handed him too much power. That realization hurt. More than the rejection. More than the years I spent chasing after him in my head. Because it meant the wound wasn't his fault. It was mine. I wanted him to complete me. To make me feel worthy. And when he didn't, I blamed him and then I tried to become him. But I didn't need to be Zaid. I didn't need to impress him. I didn't even need him to notice me. What I needed was to forgive myself. So I did something wild. I put on hijab. Not to post it. Not to show anyone. I looked in the mirror expecting to feel trapped. But instead, I felt covered. Protected. Like I was finally choosing who got to see me. Like I was drawing a boundary around my worth. It wasn't permanent. Not yet. But it was honest. And for once that felt like enough. I started attending sisters' circles at the mosque. Quiet at first. Just listening. They talked about things I never expected. Trauma, love, patience, self-respect. They weren't robots or oppressed housewives like the media always showed. They were funny, brilliant, strong. They made space for me without judgment, without expectation. One of them, Amina, once said to me, "You don't have to know everything to believe something." That sentence stuck with me. Because I didn't have all the answers. I still had doubts, fears, habits. But I also had this tug, this persistent, gentle pull, towards something better. One night I whispered the Shahada to myself. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah. I wasn't even sure I'd said it correctly. But I meant it. And after I said it, I just sat there. In the dark. Smiling through tears. Not because everything made sense now, but because for the first time I did. I wasn't Isla who got rejected. I wasn't Isla who needed revenge. I was just a woman who found God in the middle of her own mess. And maybe, just maybe, that was always the point. I didn't tell Zaid I had converted. There was no big reveal. No dramatic moment where I stood in front of him in a hijab and whispered, "It was you all along." Because it wasn't. Not anymore. Yes, he sparked something. But the journey after that, that was mine. Months passed. My life slowed down in the best way. I wasn't chasing anymore. Not validation. Not attention. Not him. I moved into a smaller flat. Deleted half my social media. Started waking up early for far, drinking mint tea, journaling instead of doom scrolling. There was peace in the routine. Peace in the prayer. Peace in the stillness I used to run from. I didn't need loud nights or louder people. I needed truth, simplicity, sincerity. And for the first time in my adult life I had all three. One afternoon I attended a seminar on women in Islam. Nothing fancy, just a small gathering in a library basement. And there he was. Zaid. He was standing by the tea table, speaking quietly with another brother. He looked exactly the same, focused, calm, thoughtful. I froze. Not because I still wanted him, but because I didn't. I thought seeing him again would spark something, desire, anger, embarrassment. Instead, I felt still, complete, like someone who had made it to the end of a long, bitter novel and finally closed the book. Eventually he noticed me. His eyes flickered with recognition. He smiled politely, then walked over. Isla, right? Yes. I thought that was you. I wasn't sure. You look different. I smiled. I feel different. He paused, studied me the way he used to study books, then said softly, "It's good to see you here." He didn't ask why, didn't pry, didn't need to, because he could tell. Not from the scarf or the salam I returned, but from the way I stood. From the quiet. From the peace. "Alhamdulillah," I said. And he nodded. We talked briefly. Nothing deep. Just small words wrapped in mutual respect. Then he went back to his conversation and I joined a group of sisters near the bookshelves. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. Because that part of my story was over. Now when people ask how I found Islam, I don't tell them about Zaid. I tell them about the night I prayed and meant it. About the day I finally forgave myself. About the peace I found when I stopped pretending. Sometimes Allah uses strange roads to bring us home. Mine started with ego, revenge, and a broken heart. But it ended with truth. With faith. With freedom. And that's all I ever really wanted.